Greetings, growers of the world. Jordan River with more Growcast today. Today, what do we have planned? Dr. Coco is back. This is a particularly strong episode with Dr. Coco. We talk about DLI and autoflowers and lights and how light affects plants. Some of the best topics and some of the deepest content that we've done on the subject. I know you're going to love it. Before we jump into today's episode, though, we got to shout out Jack Green's Garden Products, everybody. JackGreensGardenProducts.com is where you can find them. GC Listener is the code to save big bucks, currently saving 25%. Go and grab it while it's hot. On natural IPM, organic soil conditioner, and so much more. You got to try their Jack's Bug Be Gone. It's my favorite IPM solution. It's all natural. It's a pepper ferment. The plants love it, and it destroys those nasty pests. So go and try it if you haven't already. It'll be your favorite IPM solution there is. And again, find that at JackGreensGardenProducts.com and use code GCListener for 25% off. Check out their soil conditioners too. If you listen to the episode, you know all about them. Use that code, everybody, at JackGreensGardenProducts.com. Okay, let's jump into it with Dr. Coco. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to Growcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in again today. Before we get started, I urge you to share Growcast. Spread the show. It's how we grow. I really mean it. Tell a grower. It helps us out. Give us a good rating and review while you're at it. Thank you, everyone. Today, show favorite, back on the line, Dr. Coco. What up, Coco man?
Hey, everyone. How's it going? Yeah, Dr. Coco from CocoForCannabis.com.
Yeah, we're back. How you been, man? You've been busy.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. You know, it's back into the spring semester now. So I got classes going on again and trying to juggle multiple personalities, but it's good. It's good. Things are going well.
Nice, man. Nice. We appreciate you taking the time to pop in as always. You know, we have 3 things lined up here and I'm going to take us on a tangent. First thing, it's how we do it. Dr. Coco, I just realized I've been doing your Coco for Cannabis challenge over at Coco for Cannabis. You can sign up to all the grow challenges. You'll see me in there. I was doing, I chose one plant to kind of document because all the other ones were very late in flower. Pina Colada Otto, beautiful, by Moscow White Label. And I went and made a post in Slack chat and it literally said, like the God mocking me. It literally said, oh, topping my Otto because why not? So I topped the Otto. I see people top Ottos all the time and have great success.
Yes.
How
old was it when you topped it?
That's a good question. That's a great question.
That is like the question when it comes to topping Ottos.
It started flowering, and it was way too small to start flowering.
Did it start flowering before or after you topped it?
Right
like
after.
You were topping it?
After I topped it, meaning the topping seemed to have stressed it or throw it into flower somehow. And I mean, that's what it appeared to happen to me.
Well, I mean, did you plant it on or about January 1st? And is this just now being topped?
No, it was before that.
It was already before that.
That's the thing. I entered it late.
So,
you can check out my entry. It has all the dates. I'm sorry.
I'll go check it out. I think that you basically have 4 weeks. For most autos, you have up to 4 weeks to top them. If you top them after 4 weeks, then yeah, you're going to probably run into issues. That's always why I sort of give up and don't do main lines on autos, and I end up just manifolding them. But I always top autos twice, Jordan. So as long as you get them like while they're still growing, before, and really it depends on the strain. Some strains start flowering a little bit faster. With most, you have 4 weeks. With faster flowering strains, you might only have 3. So that's like from the day the seed gets wet.
Okay.
If you can top it within the first 3 weeks, I think you can top any auto. The challenge there is the plant growing fast enough that after 3 weeks, it's eligible to be topped? And oftentimes it's just not there. I mean, if you have a tough seedling stage, you're not going to get there in time. It definitely depends on, having a smooth seedling grow, having a vigorous and sort of rapidly growing seedling that gets to 6 nodes, before the 3 week mark. And if it gets to 6 nodes before the 3 week mark, then I top it. I usually top autos on like day 19 or 20.
Whoa, okay.
From getting wet, that first topping. And then it takes them about 6 days when I'm doing a main line for the side branches to grow out to the point where they're good to be topping. topped. And that puts me at like day 25, day 26 sometimes, right? And I'm thinking I got 4 weeks. So to do that final topping on a main line, I usually just give up. I'm like, nah, I'm cutting it too close to the edge here. Okay. But those are with plants that, I get humming early, do everything to speed the germination process, because you're on a clock with autos. I mean, the vegetation period, you're literally on a shot clock, and you got to get everything you want done before that shot clock runs out and the plant starts flowering. And that's why a lot of people say that autos are good for beginners. I don't know. I think that to get good autos, you need to be a good gardener during the vegetative period. Otherwise, you end up with small plants. And a lot of people have the impression that autoflowers are small plants, but that's just because you're not getting them growing fast enough during the seedling stage. You're not sort of like getting that explosive early growth. And if you do get that explosive early growth, boy, howdy. I mean, autos can be hard to contain at that point. I've had autos reach the roof of my tent. So it's tough. I mean, before I would say you can top an auto, you need to sort of know your auto. You know what I mean?
Okay, so that leads to a couple interesting questions. And I love what you just said there, because it's true. I heard someone recently talking about how autos produce small plants. And I was like, where did you hear that? Because some of the biggest, my understanding is it's some of the biggest sizes you can get. Now, I am a beginner auto grower. This is literally my second plant that I've grown. And let me ask you this, because I do feel that it had plenty of vegetating time left to go. But as a beginner auto grower, I do feel that I overfed this plant. Is it a possibility that a combination of stressors can trigger flower early? And follow-up question, do some strains just not like to be topped?
I don't think the plant really likes to be topped, like ever. I don't think that that's in its goals, in life. I think that they respond better to it when at certain stages of their growth cycle. And yeah, some plants are going to have more vigor than other plants. And certainly in a situation where you're up against a clock, it may not be advisable to top some autos, some slow growing autos. You're going to hurt yourself if you top them, just because you're going to run out of time for it to sort of recover and become bigger than it would have been before topping.
Okay, that makes sense.
As far as the feeding issue, it's definitely possible to overfeed a plant. If anything, autos would want a tiny bit more fertilizer than non-autos.
Oh, really? My understanding is that they were kind of lower feeders because of their heredity, that they didn't require the same amount of nutrition. Is that a total misunderstanding?
Well, I don't really think there's any difference at all, to be perfectly honest with you.
Wow.
The sort of the dosages of nutrients that autos can take versus photoperiod plants can take. The reason it would be higher for autos is because they have a longer photoperiod, and they're able to do more photosynthesis, and so they would need potentially to have access to more nutrients. But nutrients usually aren't the limiting factor for that photosynthesis anyways. You do sometimes run into some things from that, though, just that the autos are growing more. So in cocoa, for example, you can get calcium deficiency just because you're running them longer, and it's harder to keep the dose of calcium high enough.
That makes sense.
Just a little bit. It's really pretty marginal compared to sort of the differences from photoperiod plants, though.
Interesting. I feel I had my anvil turned out great. I'm really happy with it. I'm proud of it. But I feel I am feeling those differences right now. It's a little bit. It's also a different space. I'm growing it in a different space, so I'm kind of adjusting to that space.
Yeah.
And that light, and all the different parameters of that. And I feel like I'm getting the hang of it. But yeah, that was a little bit of a failure, and that thing was way too small to go into flower. So
yeah,
I just share my failure.
And that's the other thing. You want them, especially autos. The thing that it really, the first time I grew autos, I was sort of blown away by the rapidity of their growth, the speed of their growth during the stretch, during the second 2 weeks, sort of. Well, for the autos, it was after they started popping their pistils. They really started stretching, and I was getting like 4 inches per day growth. just like, sugarcane type growth. And that's really only because they had fully recovered from their toppings before they entered that phase. And they were able to just sort of explode. And during that stretch time, which the plant is sort of programmed to try to grow rapidly to get up above the surrounding plants so that it gets sort of the best chance at reproduction. If they're really geared to that, if they're really ready to explode, you can make huge autoflowers. It almost sort of seemed sometimes like I need to turn off the lights more because these plants are going to be growing too much, running them on like 20 on, 4 off.
It's an interesting world, man. I love it. And I'm very excited for the future of autos, but
it's so different because, that 4 inches of growth comes from because I was giving them 20 hours of light every day. With a photoperiod plant, that is also the most vigorous time of growth, but you're limited to 12 hours of photosynthesis to power that growth, essentially. So you just sort of dramatically increase the amount of energy the plant's getting, and they'll grow bigger plants. That's also the reason that you can get a larger harvest per square area or per area with autos than with photos, because you can give them a larger quantum load throughout the entire photo or flowering period.
Makes perfect sense. In an outdoor application, they make a ton of sense. In all these different climates, they make a ton of sense. That's a bit of a reversal, it's a bit of a mind freak there. It's a bit of a Chris Angel mind freak because we think of it as, the ruderalis gene is kind of inferior because of, the really insane level of quality you see across the board with high level photoperiods compared to autoflowers historically have needed to catch up. But if you think about it in the way you just said, the photoperiod gene might be the inferior thing for the farmer. And if we get the quality up high enough, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, there are huge advantages to autoflowers. I mean, huge on that commercial level. Once the quality is really established to be equivalent, huge advantages in terms of greenhouse grows, in terms of multiple harvests, and just sort of straight across the board. Right. In terms of not having to set up, light sealed spaces, that alone is sort of like a huge advantage to them. Quicker growth, quicker harvests, larger harvests per yield. If you're looking to maximize the returns to your space, we're still interested in this. Get a little bit deeper into the whole autos versus photos trade-off. If you're looking to maximize your returns to space, I think autos are already the choice. Sure. If you're looking to maximize your returns to electricity, the jury is still out.
Because of the extra time that's needed to run.
So you are going to get more yield, but we don't have enough data really to say what the relationship there is between the sort of what economists would call the marginal gains. How much more is that additional sort of yield costing you in electricity, and what is the marginal cost on that added yield? We just don't have enough data, and it's still sort of in flux. The sort of what the autos are able to do are in flux. And
that won't even be the decider for me, because for most people, getting more out of your space is what most people are after. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like if you're producing for production, you're always going
Depends
to
on a
more.
Commercial space, though, it may be different. I'm sort of thinking about what's going to take over the commercial market. I think cloning is on the way out in the commercial space as breeding improves in cannabis genetics. I think more and more commercial growers will flip over to growing seeds. There are real advantages to growing plants from seeds with plants like cannabis. And I think that the real main reason that the commercial field is largely devoted to cloning is because of the genetic consistency, which I think is getting much better with seeds and breeding. But it's also just because of the security of the propagative material. It used to be really hard to get reliable seeds. Not only were the seeds not reliable, it just wasn't sort of possible or cost effective to get them. As the cost of good genetics comes down, and as commercial growers can start sort of brokering deals to get, good, reliable seeds, there's a huge advantage for commercial growers to flip over to autos. And I sort of see that as what's going to happen in the commercial grow space. Is they're going to move from growing photoperiod clones to growing auto-flowering seeds.
Whoa. I love it, man. That's a solid prediction. And I would not be surprised myself either.
And
Love
they're
that.
going to take a hit in quality in order to do that. I think they're running those numbers that I'm talking about the marginal cost or marginal returns to electricity.
Sure.
To the power costs. Because you're right, most home growers are more concerned about the amount of space they have than the amount of power they're drawing. But in a commercial sense, you have to pay attention to both sides.
So that kind of leads nicely into our next conversation here when you're talking about that difference, the limiting factors of the photoperiodism. Something that's come up that must be one of the major differences between autoflowers and photoperiods, the way they're made up, how they act. We'll be right back with Dr. Coco. But before that, I got to make sure that you guys know that membership is open. That's right. We have our brand new revamped shiny membership at patreon.com/Growcast. You can also find that at growcastpodcast.com/membership, whatever you like. One simplified level to membership, just $10 a month. That's right, low price of $10 a month. It's discreet and anonymous, and you gain access to a huge archive of member content and episodes of Growcast from years past. Patreon.com/Growcast for the brand new shiny membership. You'll get access to the member Slack chat, simply the best cannabis community there is out there. We've got Growcast team members like Mary Beth and Travers helping you succeed in the Plant Problems channel. People aren't afraid to ask beginner questions because everyone's helpful. Everybody's helpful and positive in the Growcast Growers Chat for members. You'll also get instant access to Growcast TV, which I have to say is some of the greatest content out there for growing on the web. It's live streamed from the Growcast studio. We've got live chat up on the screen behind us, contributing to the show, asking questions of guests directly. Guests like Terp Fiend, Stephen Reisner, terpene expert Dr. Jason Lupoy, all your favorite Growcast guests, all live, all on video, plus the member podcast, weekly ad-free, and 100 episodes in the archive, plus 100 episodes of Growcast from years past, plus weekly giveaways and more, all for just $10 a month at patreon.com/Growcast. Join, cancel anytime. It's discreet, it's easy through Patreon. We'll see you there, everybody. Let's get back to Dr. Coco. The subject of DLI is on our list. We got to talk about this, man. It's been coming up a ton. We touched on it before. There was an episode in the past where I talked about how one of my plants always seemed to go to sleep early. Yeah. How it was a nice, vigorous plant and it was praying and all, but towards the end, plants know when the lights are about to kick off. They kind of start to go to sleep early, but one would get sleepy before.
They definitely pick up on that and they learn that rhythm. So.
And you came on and said, that's not what we're talking about, because people kept saying DLI. And you said, that's not what we're talking about. You backed me up, which he was just a sleepy plant. But could you maybe break it down really in layman's terms? Like, let's just pretend that I just finished studying pokercoaching.com and I took several bong rips. Let's just pretend that, and then really break down in DLI, what define it. What exactly does it mean?
So DLI is essentially the amount of light. It's really the number of photons that strike a target in a 24-hour period. Mm-hmm. PPFD, which we should all be sort of more familiar with than DLI, because PPFD really matters and DLI kind of doesn't. PPFD is the number of photons that strike a target per second.
Okay.
So one is a per second measure of density and the other is a per day measure of density.
Okay.
And, DLI is useful in a lot of specific agricultural or horticultural situations. Some plants have minimums, for example. Sometimes when you're growing things like algae, you need to be very aware of sort of what the DLI is in order to get the right reproduction levels and in order to sort of have other things like that. So there are a lot of applications for measuring and understanding DLI. When it comes to cannabis, we can describe differences between different plants. For example, we can say that autoflowers can have a larger DLI or a more DLI than a photoperiod plant during the during the flowering period, because it can have the lights on longer, right? So DLI is sort of like, where PPFD is per second. And if you're only doing it, for X number of seconds, then you have a smaller DLI than if you're doing it for X times 2 number of seconds.
Right.
All right. What a lot of growers get confused about DLI is that they think it's a limit. They think that there is some
inside
limit.
The plant.
Yeah, like the plant reaches the limit on a 24-hour basis, and it's like, I'm done. I need to wait till tomorrow.
That's exactly right.
Plants don't do that, and that's not. There is no 24-hour limit on the photosynthesis like that with cannabis. Cannabis photosynthesis is limited on that second by second basis, and that's why we always pay attention to PPFD, because the plant can like sort of exceed the limit and eventually get into an issue in terms of PPFD, even though, the DLI on 2 plants was the same. Say you were trying to run a plant for like 6 hours at 2,000 PPFD, and I was running a plant for 12 hours at 1,000 PPFD. Mm-hmm. We would have the exact same DLI, but your plant would be burnt toast and mine would be fine.
That makes perfect sense. So is it applicable to cannabis? Sorry, you can finish your thought, but
it's just that's the limit that we really need to pay attention to, is that per second limit. And then photoperiod plants have a 12-hour limit during the photo period, during the flowering period. They have a 12-hour limit. So the DLI is limited by the maximum PPFD times the photo period, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. But it seems like it's irrelevant.
It is essentially irrelevant. It's not. It's just a function of the maximum PPFD and the amount of time you can have the lights on.
Okay. Wow.
And that's why autoflowers have a higher DLI, and that's why they're able to grow more and grow faster, and you get 4 inches of stretch during the stretch period per day, and you can get larger harvests per area. All of that is because autos can be exposed to a higher DLI than photoperiod plants at the same PPFD.
That does make sense. So it's just the only reason that DLI is different is because of the photoperiodism itself. Otherwise, it's just a more important measurement for other things. Like you said, minimums that need to...
Yeah, minimums. If you're trying to keep a mother plant alive, right, you might want to know what the minimum DLI is for cannabis. And that's a thing. Sort of what's the minimum amount of light that a plant will need before it dies, right? Weren't you the one that was talking about keeping some plants in your dark garage and doing a harvest anyways?
That's fascinating. So you think it just took off because it's a nice sounding acronym and people just, it's like what happens.
It's like VPD. Can I just make a point here? This is like VPD. New growers, when they're 3 months into growing, they learn about these things. And then they think that they know something that nobody else knows. And they're like, oh, well, I manage my grow using DLI and I set my climate using VPD and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, these are true sort of measures of important things in a horticultural garden, but they're, you need to know what they're used for. And almost everybody that sort of parades around talking about using VPD and using DLI is sort of not exactly understanding what those things really should be used for. And we've talked about VPD before. It's an important measurement, but it only measures one aspect of the climate. And so it's really not a good idea to only pay attention to VPD, as we've discussed. You really need to start by paying attention to temperature and then thinking about, well, what's a good sort of humidity, not only for this temperature in terms of VPD, but also for the plant in terms of not getting mold and things like that. I mean, VPD is just one part of it.
That's so true. It's more about the 2 factors that make up VPD. But you're right. For the people going around talking about DLI, you're right. Because
and people think like we were talking about, that there was this sort of oh, well, they reach their DLI limit and then the plant starts drooping because it can't take more. And it's no. The plant starts drooping at that time because it's used to the lights going off soon.
Right.
And the plants definitely prepare themselves for the dark period. Another really interesting thing about this, we think, you have to think about plants require darkness or all these things, and flowering or photoperiod plants do for flowering, but plants like cannabis are really designed to survive darkness. Darkness is pretty much a stress for the plant. I mean, it's like, they're eating all day and then we're going to cut off your food. They get ready for it. They learn the rhythm of the cycle, and they'll store energy to survive the dark period. And so you can see some of the sort of physical manifestations of the plant's cycle in that way. And that's the leaf and stuff like that. If you took that plant that was used to like an 18-6 and you saw a really good sort of droopy cycle, if you flip that onto a 24-hour cycle, it would stop doing its drooping after a couple of days.
Damn, that's a good point. That's a really good point. So what is it?
That kind of learn that the lights aren't going off, and it would be like, oh, okay, I don't need to store energy anymore at this time. I don't need to sort of switch my gears into like a mini hibernation. I'm going to be able to keep going, and the plant will just stay like that.
That is a really interesting thought, man. I'd never thought of it like that. And that is interesting that what you said about the kind of plants don't have. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't have the same. They don't have a circadian rhythm, do they?
They sort of do, yeah.
Do they?
It's a little bit different, but yeah, they learn that.
Point.
they do learn that rhythm a little bit, and that's actually what you are witnessing there in like the leaf drop thing. It's not that they are sort of running into a physical limit or some sort of issue with PPFD or photosynthesis or DLI or whatever. It's just that they're used to it.
Sure.
They think they know what's coming next, essentially. They've become kind of programmed for that rhythm.
So rhythm aside, I guess what I'm saying is back to your point of surviving the darkness. Yeah. That's not the case with humans. And I think we like to think that our plants are little humans. And to be fair, there are so many incredible relations and similarities and parallels. But that's not, I mean, with humans, sleep and our circadian rhythms are so incredibly important for breaking down plaques and tangles in our brain and reducing inflammation and processing all of these, this basically tidal wave of neurons that's always occurring within our minds. So we think that that's happening to the plants when they sleep. If what you're saying is true.
No, it's not. Right. Exactly. They don't have brains that need to sort of process information from like long-term and short-term memory and, sort through their psychology and dreams and stuff like that. That's not part of plant life as far as I'm concerned.
But haven't you also said, to back that up, that's all well and good, but haven't you also said that there are some processes that do better with a dark period, and that's why you don't run your autos at 24-hour light? Am I right?
It's interesting. It's almost that the plant does better when it has a rhythm. It's not so much that there needs to be, that there's certain things that can't happen. There's the Calvin cycle, which is often called the dark cycle of photosynthesis. And people think that that's something that has to go on like during the dark. No, it's just that's the part of the photosynthesis that doesn't require light. But that quote unquote dark cycle runs constantly in plants. It doesn't need to be dark in order for it to run. It just also runs when it's dark, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It's sort of an accident of early botany that it's known as the dark cycle. And that's because it was first observed during the dark period, and they thought that's what was going on with plants at the dark, like when they dreamed or whatever. But no, it's more an issue of having a rhythm, having some sort of sequence, you know what I mean? Like a cycle almost, as opposed to a designated like sleeping period. Although this is an area that we're still sort of trying to better understand in plants like cannabis.
Interesting, man. Very interesting, because
those studies, figuring out the optimal day length, figuring out sort of 4 different species of plants too. One of the best studies about autos and day length that I'm aware of, at least, was an in-house study that Royal Queen Seeds did, and they talked to me about. And they said that they've tried their autos on several different light sequences and their lighting schedules. And they argued that 24, which is what I now run because of that conversation with my autos, was the best performing. And that it was better performing than the 18 6s and the 24 zeros, which were both similar, they said.
Interesting, man. Interesting stuff. I would love to do a test for 24-hour. The only thing is I have other plants in that auto tent. So, but right now it's all herbs. So maybe I don't know. I'm going to look into that, man. 24 hours. Let us know long term if you think if that proves out. I'd really like to hear you follow up on that, man.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about. And there's going to be more research on this, and we'll be able to really understand sort of better. Particularly, this is an issue with autoflowers. Because autoflowers, we have a lot more wiggle room.
Yeah,
we know for a fact that we want to give photoperiod plants as much light as we can during the flowering period. We're not anywhere sort of near any kind of limits because we're cut off at 12 hours. But autoflowers, it's like, would it be good to run maybe 21 hours of light instead of 20 versus what sort of, and does that, what is the dark period really accomplishing for the plant?
Right.
To better understand that, so we would be able to understand how different types of plants might respond differently. It's all a bit of what we like to call sort of a black box situation right now. Like, we sort of know what goes in and what comes out of the black box, but we don't know exactly what happens inside there.
Really interesting, man. Love diving into topics like this, and I want to cover this more in the future. We have 12 minutes till the heart out here. I think there's one topic that we're going to be able to cover in that time, because I don't know how deep it'll go, but I had to bring this up, man. Please, I'm going to give this whole speech, and just feel free to step on it if I'm wrong. But I've noticed something, and I think a lot of growers are going to identify with what I'm talking about. I've really noticed something observing the trichomes. I'm in flower. I actually just chopped half my plants. Fun time. I like late flower. A lot of people say that it's like a boring time. Plants look the same. I'm a big fan of late flower.
Yeah, we call it the waiting.
I like it personally. I like those smells. I like getting in there with the trichomes daily. One thing that I've always noticed, the buds that have a top that's leaning up against the side of a wall, leaning up against a tent wall, getting hit with too much wind, those buds always seem to ripen faster. The trichomes are the first to turn amber. Their pistils are always darker. They always have the least white hairs. Observing the trichomes, yes, some of them are damaged from like the friction, but most of them are fine. Why does physical agitation appear to mature trichomes faster? And if that's the case, why aren't we just like noogieing our plants every day to get them to go fast? I mean, you don't want to break the trikes, but talk to me about that agitation.
So there's a few things. I hadn't really ever thought about it being in terms of agitation. I'm really curious about the on the side is stuff, because I mean, I'm trying to think about my own grows and sort of the science that would affect some of these things.
Dude, you guys got to write in. You guys know what I'm talking about. You listeners who have observed this know what I'm talking about. Write Dr. Coco.
I know
you pay attention to
what
this
you're
too,
talking about. Hold on. I'm not totally shooting you down in terms of that. I think I do know some of what you're dealing with. It's just the comments about the up against the walls ones. I'm not sure about the light should be worse there. That's what I'm thinking. And I'm wondering.
I mean, just one corner of the bud is touching the wall. It's not completely smushed, but you know what I mean? Like the one that brushes against the wall.
Right. But up against the wall, you should be getting lower density light than you are in the middle. I mean, and ideally, that light density would be one of the big sort of issues that causes the ripening.
Oh, interesting.
But let's start from the beginning here. Plants will definitely ripen the top first. Mm-hmm. They will definitely ripen areas, and it's really the top. So, like physically the highest point on the plant.
Okay.
And they'll ripen other areas. They're looking, the plant is evolved. I often sort of put intention into the plant where intention probably doesn't belong, but the plants are evolved to become pollinated, right? And so they want to get up high and get pollinated, and they want to be exposed to wind, means that they're going to be pollinated and other things like that. So the plant can prioritize those parts of the plant that, stand the greatest chance of being pollinated. And plants are evolved to do that to a certain extent. So that accounts for a lot of the reasons that the plant doesn't mature all at exactly the same speed, and that the top of the plant will mature faster than the bottom of the plant. that's going to be sort of the biggest issue on the plant itself. I don't know that shaking the plant, I mean, the sort of simulating the wind could potentially have an impact on the plant. I do believe that there's a pathway there.
Interesting. So I like how I opened you up to shoot me down, and then as soon as you did, I was like, everybody write him and tell him I'm right. But I do want to say another thing I've observed on this is if I keep scoping the same nug, the touching of the nug, the pressing on the nug, please guys, write me. Tell me if this is something that you have not observed. Tell me if this is something you identify with, or if I'm way off. I would love to hear from the audience on this one.
It sounds more like you're fondling them than you're scoping them.
Well, you have to a degree when you get them in there. You know what I mean?
Touche. Yeah.
I'm telling you.
I actually really like it. And then I'm just sort of like smelling my hands later because you get all the trichomes and the oils and everything. And it's like
the bottom of your scope gets all hairy because it's picked up the, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. This is interesting. I'm going to put this on my little to chat with Dr. Photon about, see if he has any thoughts about the thing about the being on this side. I'd love to know if other people have experienced that thought. One of my first thoughts there is
light.
If your buds, it's light. So let me explain. If your buds are better on the edges than they are in the center, my thought is your light too strong in the center?
Oh, whoa, that's an interesting thought. You are a light detective, man. That is fascinating.
Because that might be sort of like cooking them a little bit. And then, the ones on the edge, because I'm definitely thinking that the buds on the edge are going to have lower PPFD, and that should hurt unless the middle's too strong, and then the edges are just sort of like at the right level.
When you say harm and hurt, does that necessarily translate to maturity? Because that was definitely not the case.
No, it wouldn't really either, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Because it's not that they were bigger; it's that they were more mature. I'm telling you, man. We'll see. And is this the trichome progression?
It's interesting. I actually almost prefer thinking about the other route. I think one of the problems is it would be better if these trees sort of the trees, thinking about big plants, if the cannabis plants all sort of matured their buds at the same time. Wouldn't you prefer that?
Oh God, of course. Yeah. Especially, on one plant for sure, but then across all strains, that'd be nice if they were all 8-week strains.
So I think the goal is almost not speeding up the tops. The goal would be slowing down the tops.
Keeping everything even.
Keep everything even, or the goal would be speeding up the bottoms more. And I do know some people, I've been hit with these offers lately to test this, these internal lights that go in between the rows and try to give you like this little side lighting stuff. And I was telling them, I'm like, I don't think that's very efficient. And bottom lights. And it's interesting though, because I think that we've talked about this before in terms of like the shining a light at the side of a piece of paper, but they do get something from it. And as efficiency really kind of cranks up in terms of, the cost of electricity becomes lower for putting in that light, it may eventually become worth it. And you could get sort of a more even maturation of the entire plant.
Oh, because the bottoms that's very interesting. Dr. Coco, I had a dream that there was a product in my grow, and I was like, and someone was asking about it. I was like, yeah, Dr. Coco loves these. And it was a cone. It was a reflective cone that sits in your pot.
Yeah.
And it reflects the light back. I mean, it doesn't make sense because your canopy should be catching the light, but it reflects the light that's coming from your top light back up to in my dream, up to the underside of your plant. And it boosted your yields.
I used to do that, and then I kind of gave up because I wondered. It wasn't that. I had this, what is it called? It's like that thin little insulation material that's made out of like
mylar.
Yeah, it's like a mylar insulation stuff. It's kind of semi-rigid. It's about 1/4 of an inch thick, but kind of like a cardboard almost.
Yeah, that's foamy, bendable. I know exactly. It's almost like packing material.
I had that stuff, and I cut pieces of it so I could completely cover the pots and like everything, and just like little holes for the plants to grow through. And I was doing that, but I had to take it out every day to stupid water the plants and put the things back in every day. And like you said, once the canopy fills in, it becomes pretty useless. And
Pretty
before
cool.
the canopy fills in, it just occurred to me that I had plenty of light already in the tent for the little plants, and it wasn't sort of an issue of trying to capture every photon at that point, because the light fixture is more than capable of sort of putting out plenty of photons for the little seedlings. But yeah, no, it's not a terrible idea, Jordan. I mean, that is actually, people often ask me where I got my white saucers from. And I have to explain to everybody that I painted them white because I
makes them more reflective.
Yeah, it makes them more reflective. Even like the bottom ones that, like, you know, are going to be in the shade anyways. I just didn't want to put anything black in my tent. So there's something to that.
But I think it is interesting. You did a couple mind freaks today about slowing down the tops to match the bottoms. But I do think it's interesting that even maturation, as you say, maybe some underlighting helping that out. Maybe there's pots with lights down the road. I don't know. Just interesting.
It would be, you know, I'd want to do it more to even see if it helped. Because there's a question as to whether or not that would even help. I mean, the leading theory here is that the reason the lower buds are not mature is just because the plant is prioritizing the more important buds.
Sure.
And if the plant had more light, it would still probably prioritize the more important buds.
Oh, that's one way to think about it. It's a good point. Yeah. I don't know though.
Until you really get to the point where it has enough light to prioritize everything. And there is a point there. You know, I've done lots of different sort of training and trimming and removing various amounts of undergrowth from plants. And if you remove enough of the undergrowth from the plant, I did this with the blueberry that I just grew in the Plant Training Grow Challenge. I didn't have any like larvae I mean, I had undergrowth. I definitely had buds down there, but they matured at pretty much the same rate as the canopy and were as hard and sort of dense as the canopy, a little bit smaller, but as hard and sort of dense and as quality. And that's just because there weren't a lot of them. If there were a lot of them, the plant would have divided that energy amongst a lot more sort of undergrowth buds, and they all would have been less mature and less well-developed. So part of it is just sort of matching the number of budding sites to the amount of light the plant is receiving. And if you have, you know, not enough light, the undergrowth is going to be probably under mature, even if you're putting that light sort of like directly on the undergrowth, you know, with underlighting or side lighting or internal row lighting or whatever. If there's just too much plant for the total quantum yield,
that does make sense.
It's going to prioritize the tops.
I'd still like to try it. That does make sense. And I think you're right.
It is a way to get more light onto the plant. I mean, if you're really at maximum PPFD at the canopy, the only way you could add additional lighting at that point really is, you know, either increasing the CO2 is one route, but the other route would be putting light on parts of the plant that aren't currently getting enough light. And the only way to do that would be underlighting or side lighting.
Right. That makes sense. And I think you're right. I think that most growers are just a little too gentle with their bottom pruning when they're shaving legs. I think that
it's hard. I had to go in even during the flowering period and cut off stuff that like are buds. There's like actual buds on the stuff that I'm cutting off.
I still think that's worth it. I'm glad you say that. I've told this to people. Even if you have to go a little bit late, like save that energy. Even if you're in flower, you agree with that? Pluck off those.
I've trimmed enough plants to know what that thing is going to look like at the end of the harvest and 100%. Be like, I don't want to freaking bother with this thing trimming. I'd rather redirect whatever energy was going to go into this thing up into the top. Or
even if you're in flower, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, because even though, you know, even when you only have a couple of plants, when you get big plants and they're like pruned or trained as manifolds or mainlines, especially, it's hard to keep up with all of the little shoots that might come off of them. So, don't be afraid to cut them off even late. Just because it's got a little pom-pom at the end of it doesn't mean that it's going to be a decent thing to smoke in the end and it or worth your effort to trim or whatever. So, you cut that off, make yourself a cup of tea with it or something and have a nice day. And
yeah, a little one hitter, a little like teaser one hitter. I like to dry them out for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's said you're racing maybe, but it's like super early. Or just whatever, put them in your butter stash and cook them up next time you do something like that. But don't feel bad. I know it's a big hurdle for a lot of growers to cut off anything that looks like it might become cannabis. And they're like, I'm trying to grow cannabis and this is going to become cannabis and I'm not cutting it off. And it's
I like that approach.
Yeah, it'll serve your interest. So
100% right. And I like doing, we really got to run here, but I do like doing those early samples and letting them dry and smoke. Ever since I saw that article, the evolution of the Trichome article, growcastpodcast.com/evolution. And it shows how terpene levels and cannabinoid levels ride up and down, even as early as veg. Anyways, Dr. Coco, this is one of our strongest episodes, man. I have to say, you've been bringing the heat lately. We appreciate you coming in here, dropping knowledge, everything you're doing at cocoforcannabis.com. Go and check it out, everybody. Grow challenges, light testing, all that stuff. Thank you, Dr. Coco. I appreciate you, man.
Excellent, man. No, it's a lot of fun, Jordan. I always look forward to these episodes. And yeah, when we get into some fun topics. So I'm glad to hear you say that. I hope the audience enjoys it. I hope everybody comes and visits us at Coco for Cannabis. And, we're signing up not too soon. We're going to start signing up for the Spring Auto Flower Challenge. So we've been talking a lot about autos in this episode. That's always, it's a lot of fun if you're interested in growing autos, to grow them alongside like several hundred other people that are also trying to grow autos and just see how all the different autos do. It's really one of the most fascinating challenges for that period, for that point. There. Yeah, it's fun. So get that on your schedule. That is April 20th. We drop our auto flowering seeds, 420. And come on over, check us out. We got the New Year's Grow Challenge. Jordan's growing in it. We got a bunch of growers. Again, several hundred growers, all keeping their journals and growing along. And we are marching towards the flip in that one. So
nice. I'll see you there, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Gotta run at Growcast on Instagram. Share the show. Appreciate you all so much for being subscribed. Big stuff coming at you. We'll see you next time. This is Dr. Coco and Jordan River signing off, saying be safe and grow smarter.
Grow with love, everyone.
That's our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Strong episode with Dr. Coco. Stay tuned. We got some great stuff coming. You'll love the next episode with Mary Beth and some new guests we got lined up. Yeah, we got some good stuff in the works. Quick shout out to Stu's Smoke and Vape. Here in Illinois, they hooked me up. We were doing Growcast TV, our live web show for members, up at patreon.com/Growcast. Go and check that out. And Stu's Smoke and Vape all across Illinois. But the one up here in Algonquin, they hooked us up with some glass. So I wanted to shout them out. Thank you so much. Truly the greatest smoke shop in the Illinois region. And if you go up to the one in Algonquin, you might just see me there. So Stu's Smoke and Vape. Thank you for that. Also, thank you to Jay Blanked on SoundCloud for doing the beat. And Illinois Canna Consulting, of course, Riser Rich's consulting company for all your consulting needs here in the Midwest and beyond. All right, everyone, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Stay subscribed. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.